The corporate world looks different at 2 a.m. when the lights are dim, the security is minimal, and the people still working believe they're completely private. For 15 years, he'd seen the real business that happened after normal hours, the deals that couldn't be discussed during the day, the meetings that required absolute secrecy, and the activities that would never appear in official corporate records. Until those activities revealed systematic crimes that were generating millions in illegal profits while destroying honest businesses and innocent investors. Welcome to Silent Heroes. Before we begin this powerful story of corruption discovered in unexpected places, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Robert Bobby Santos had been working the night shift as head janitor at the prestigious Meridian Tower in downtown Chicago for 15 years, responsible for maintaining 42 floors of executive offices, conference rooms, and corporate facilities that housed some of the most powerful financial and legal firms in the Midwest. At 51, Bobby had built a reputation as the most reliable and discreet night maintenance supervisor in the building, known for his thoroughness in cleaning sensitive corporate environments, his understanding of executive privacy requirements, and his ability to work efficiently around late-night business activities without disrupting important meetings or confidential discussions. Bobby's responsibilities included supervising a team of 12 night janitors who maintained offices for investment banks, law firms, and consulting companies whose clients demanded absolute confidentiality in their business dealings. The work required security clearances, discretion about confidential documents, and the ability to work around executive schedules that often extended far into the night. The night shift provided Bobby with steady income and comprehensive benefits while allowing him to work in professional environments where his attention to detail and respect for corporate security protocols were valued by companies that handled sensitive financial and legal matters for high-profile clients whose business decisions affected thousands of employees and investors. Bobby's cleaning routine included executive offices where million-dollar transactions were planned, conference rooms where merger and acquisition deals were negotiated, and secure areas where investment strategies worth billions of dollars were developed by financial professionals whose decisions affected global markets and pension funds. The corporate tenants of Meridian Tower included hedge funds that managed retirement investments for thousands of working families, law firms that represented Fortune 500 companies in regulatory matters, and consulting firms that advised government agencies on policy decisions that affected entire industries and millions of workers whose livelihoods depended on honest corporate governance. Bobby's work schedule required him to be present during the late-night hours when many of the most sensitive corporate activities took place: international conference calls with overseas markets, emergency board meetings that addressed crisis situations, and strategic planning sessions that determined the future of major corporations and their employees. But Bobby Santos wasn't just a night janitor maintaining corporate offices for Chicago's financial elite. He was former Special Agent Roberto Santos, Corporate Security Division, Federal Bureau of Investigation, with 18 years of experience investigating white-collar crimes, including corporate espionage, insider trading, and securities fraud that had cost investors and pension funds billions of dollars. Bobby's FBI career had specialized in cases involving systematic corporate corruption, requiring him to develop expertise in financial fraud detection, corporate surveillance techniques, and the behavioral patterns that indicated when legitimate business activities were being used to cover sophisticated criminal operations that exploited corporate systems and investor trust. During his federal service, Bobby had investigated hundreds of cases involving corporate executives who used their positions to steal proprietary information, manipulate stock prices, and defraud investors through schemes that appeared to be normal business activities but were actually carefully planned criminal operations that generated enormous illegal profits. Bobby's specialized training included advanced coursework in financial analysis, corporate communications interception, and the surveillance techniques needed to investigate white-collar criminals who used sophisticated methods to conceal their activities while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business operations that met regulatory requirements. His undercover assignments had included infiltrating corporate environments as maintenance staff, security personnel, and temporary employees to gather evidence of insider trading, corporate espionage, and securities fraud that traditional investigation methods couldn't detect due to the closed nature of executive business environments and the sophisticated methods used by white-collar criminals. Bobby's FBI career had ended with medical retirement following a severe back injury sustained during a raid on a corporate fraud network that had been operating from a downtown office building similar to Meridian Tower. The injury had left Bobby with permanent mobility limitations that prevented him from continuing active federal law enforcement work but didn't interfere with janitorial duties. The transition from investigating corporate crime to maintaining corporate offices had been both ironic and therapeutic for someone who'd spent 18 years witnessing how corporate executives exploited their positions to commit crimes that destroyed the financial security of ordinary working people, retirees, and small investors who trusted the system to protect their life savings. Night janitorial work allowed Bobby to remain in corporate environments without the stress and physical demands of federal law enforcement. Instead of building cases against white-collar criminals and testifying in complex fraud trials, Bobby was providing essential services that kept corporate offices clean and functional for legitimate business activities. For 15 years, Bobby had deliberately avoided analyzing the corporate activities he observed during his night shift for signs of criminal behavior that would have been crucial evidence during his FBI years investigating white-collar crime. He developed professional blindness to warning signals that might indicate executives were engaged in illegal activities, focusing exclusively on janitorial work rather than the investigative instincts that had once defined his professional life. Bobby had trained himself to see only normal corporate business activities, late-night work sessions that were part of legitimate business operations, and the kind of executive behavior that belonged to high-pressure corporate environments rather than the behavioral indicators that might suggest criminal activities were being conducted under the cover of normal business operations. His interactions with corporate executives were designed to be purely professional and service-oriented, avoiding the kind of observation or information gathering that might remind him of the federal enforcement work he'd left behind. Bobby's relationship with corporate tenants was built around maintenance services, building security, and facility management rather than the suspicious scrutiny that had been necessary during his corporate crime investigations. The peaceful routine of night maintenance work had provided exactly the kind of healing that Bobby needed after 18 years of confronting corporate corruption and the institutional failures that sometimes allowed white-collar criminals to continue operating while ordinary investors and workers suffered the consequences of financial fraud and corporate misconduct. But this Tuesday night was different. This Tuesday night, Bobby arrived for his regular shift at Meridian Tower and immediately noticed unusual activity patterns and security modifications that triggered every investigative instinct that had been trained into him during 18 years of corporate crime enforcement. The 38th floor, which housed Pinnacle Investment Management, was showing signs of unusual late-night activity that went beyond normal business operations. Bobby observed that conference room lights were on at unusual hours, security cameras had been repositioned to avoid certain areas, and executives were meeting with individuals who didn't appear to be legitimate business associates. More concerning, Bobby noticed that Pinnacle's waste disposal patterns had changed dramatically over the past month. Instead of normal corporate waste that included typical business documents and office materials, the company was generating large amounts of shredded paper and electronic waste that suggested systematic destruction of potentially incriminating evidence. During his cleaning routine, Bobby overheard fragments of conversations that included references to insider information, advance notification, and guaranteed returns, terminology that suggested possible securities fraud or insider trading activities rather than legitimate investment management discussions. Bobby also observed that Pinnacle executives were using encrypted communication devices during their late-night meetings, avoiding the company's normal phone and email systems in ways that suggested they were attempting to prevent their communications from being monitored or recorded by regulatory authorities. Most significantly, Bobby noticed that Pinnacle's client meetings were taking place during unusual hours and involved individuals who appeared to be receiving confidential information about upcoming corporate announcements, merger activities, and regulatory decisions before that information became public knowledge. Bobby realized that his observations were documenting potential insider trading operations that could be generating millions of dollars in illegal profits while defrauding honest investors who didn't have access to confidential corporate information before it affected stock prices and market values. The evidence Bobby was gathering suggested that Pinnacle Investment Management might be operating a sophisticated insider trading network that exploited confidential corporate information to generate guaranteed profits for select clients while violating securities laws that were designed to ensure fair and honest financial markets. Bobby faced a decision that would determine whether his 15 years of peaceful retirement from corporate crime investigation would end, or whether he would allow criminal activities to continue operating under his observation while he continued providing janitorial services to companies that might be defrauding investors and pension funds. The discovery forced Bobby to confront the possibility that his night janitorial work had provided him with access to exactly the kind of corporate criminal activity he had investigated during his FBI career, and that ignoring the evidence would allow financial crimes to continue harming innocent investors. Bobby continued his normal janitorial routine while his trained instincts automatically cataloged additional evidence that confirmed his suspicions about systematic corporate crimes being conducted at Pinnacle Investment Management. The patterns he was observing weren't random, they indicated organized criminal activity that exploited corporate systems to generate illegal profits through securities fraud. Bobby's access to Pinnacle's offices during his cleaning shifts allowed him to observe document disposal practices that revealed systematic destruction of evidence. The company's shredding volume had increased by over 300% in recent weeks, and the documents being destroyed included what appeared to be client communications, trading records, and meeting notes that would normally be retained for regulatory compliance. During his late-night cleaning of Pinnacle's conference rooms, Bobby discovered that executives were conducting meetings with individuals who appeared to be receiving advance information about corporate earnings announcements, merger discussions, and regulatory decisions that would affect stock prices before that information became available to public investors. Bobby observed Pinnacle executives using specialized communication equipment that bypassed normal corporate phone and email systems, suggesting they were attempting to avoid creating permanent records of conversations that might be subpoenaed by regulatory investigators or used as evidence in securities fraud prosecutions. More concerning, Bobby noticed that Pinnacle's trading activities showed patterns that suggested systematic exploitation of insider information. The company's investment returns were consistently timed to coincide with major corporate announcements, regulatory decisions, and market-moving events in ways that indicated advanced knowledge rather than legitimate investment analysis. Bobby's observations revealed that Pinnacle executives were maintaining two sets of client records, official documentation that appeared to comply with regulatory requirements, and hidden records that tracked insider trading activities and the distribution of confidential information to select clients who paid premium fees for guaranteed investment returns. The criminal network appeared to include corporate executives from major companies who were providing confidential information about earnings, mergers, and strategic decisions in exchange for personal financial benefits, regulatory officials who were sharing advance information about policy decisions, and financial professionals who were coordinating trading activities to maximize profits from insider information. Bobby realized he was documenting evidence of a sophisticated insider trading network that was generating tens of millions of dollars in illegal profits while systematically defrauding honest investors, who didn't have access to confidential corporate information before it affected market prices. During one particularly revealing late-night cleaning session, Bobby overheard a conference call where Pinnacle executives discussed revenue sharing with information sources and coordination requirements for advanced positioning, language that clearly indicated systematic insider trading rather than legitimate investment activities. Bobby also discovered that Pinnacle was using complex financial instruments and offshore accounts to conceal the sources of their insider information and to hide the illegal profits generated through securities, fraud from regulatory oversight, and criminal investigation. The scope of the criminal operation included multiple major corporations whose executives were providing confidential information, several regulatory agencies where officials were sharing advance notice of policy decisions, and international financial networks that were helping to launder insider trading profits through legitimate-appearing investment activities. Bobby understood that his janitorial position had provided him with access to evidence of systematic corporate corruption that was affecting the integrity of financial markets while defrauding pension funds, retirement accounts, and individual investors who trusted the system to operate fairly and honestly. But Bobby also realized that his continued observation of criminal activities was creating personal risk if Pinnacle executives discovered that their illegal operations were being monitored by someone with federal law enforcement background and the expertise to recognize securities fraud and insider trading. Bobby faced a critical decision about whether to maintain his peaceful retirement from corporate crime investigation or to risk his safety and livelihood by returning to law enforcement work that could expose criminal networks but might also make him a target for retaliation by corporate criminals who had demonstrated willingness to eliminate threats to their operations. The evidence he was gathering represented exactly the kind of systematic corporate fraud that his FBI career had been dedicated to investigating and prosecuting. But taking action would require abandoning the quiet life he had built while potentially exposing himself to dangers from criminals who had millions of dollars in illegal profits to protect. Bobby understood that securities fraud and insider trading were destroying the financial security of honest investors, including working families and retirees whose pension funds were being systematically defrauded by corporate executives who exploited their positions for personal gain at the expense of people who depended on honest financial markets for their retirement security. Bobby made a decision that would determine whether his 15 years of peaceful janitorial work were permanently over or whether this discovery would force him to return to the dangerous world of corporate crime investigation that had nearly ended his law enforcement career with a serious injury. Instead of withdrawing from his janitorial position and allowing federal agents to conduct traditional investigation that might take months to penetrate Pinnacle's sophisticated criminal operations, Bobby would use his unique access as a trusted night janitor to gather real-time evidence that could expose the entire insider trading network before they could detect investigation and destroy critical evidence. Bobby began conducting systematic documentation of Pinnacle's criminal activities while maintaining his normal janitorial routine to avoid creating suspicion. His law enforcement background provided him with the expertise to recognize and preserve evidence that would be crucial for securities fraud prosecutions while ensuring that his evidence gathering wouldn't alert the criminal network to federal interest in their operations. Over the next 2 weeks, Bobby's intelligence gathering revealed the complete organizational structure of an insider trading network that included corrupt executives from 12 major corporations, regulatory officials from 3 federal agencies, and financial professionals who were coordinating systematic securities fraud worth over $200 million in illegal profits. Bobby documented evidence that Pinnacle executives were receiving advance information about corporate earnings announcements, merger negotiations, and regulatory decisions from a network of corrupt insiders who were being compensated through complex financial arrangements that appeared to be legitimate consulting fees but were actually payments for confidential information. The criminal network's trading activities were coordinated through encrypted communications and offshore financial accounts that concealed the systematic nature of their insider trading while generating enormous profits that were shared among network participants according to the value of the confidential information they provided. Bobby also discovered that Pinnacle was operating a client pyramid where wealthy investors paid premium fees for access to exclusive investment opportunities that were actually guaranteed profits generated through insider trading, while the company maintained legitimate investment activities as cover for their criminal operations. During his evidence gathering, Bobby observed Pinnacle executives coordinating with corrupt corporate insiders to time major trading activities around confidential corporate announcements, regulatory decisions, and market-moving events that would generate guaranteed profits for clients who believed they were receiving legitimate investment advice. But Bobby's undercover investigation also attracted attention from security consultants within Pinnacle's network who were trained to detect potential law enforcement surveillance and eliminate threats to operations that generated millions of dollars in monthly profits for criminal network participants. During his final week of evidence gathering, Bobby noticed that his movements within the building were being monitored by individuals who weren't part of normal building security, and that Pinnacle executives had begun discussing operational security and external threats in ways that suggested they were aware that their activities might be under investigation. Bobby realized that his law enforcement background might have been discovered through background investigations that sophisticated criminal networks conducted to protect themselves from federal infiltration, and that the next several days would determine whether his evidence reached federal prosecutors safely or whether he would become a target for elimination by criminals who had demonstrated willingness to use violence to protect their operations. Bobby activated emergency communication protocols he hadn't used since his FBI retirement, contacting specialized white-collar crime units that were trained to handle evidence about corporate criminal networks while ensuring that his safety wouldn't be compromised by premature enforcement actions that might alert criminals to ongoing investigation. Agent Patricia Williams, this is Bobby Santos, former FBI corporate security. I have documented evidence of systematic insider trading network involving multiple corporations, regulatory officials, and financial fraud worth over $200 million. Immediate federal response required before network discovers investigation. The federal response was immediate and professional. Bobby, we've been tracking suspicious trading patterns that match your description. Can you maintain your position until coordinated enforcement action can be executed without alerting the criminal network? Bobby understood that maintaining his janitorial cover might require continuing to work around criminal activities while federal agencies prepared complex prosecutions that could dismantle the entire network. But he also knew that his position was becoming increasingly dangerous as Pinnacle's security procedures detected his unusual interest in their operations rather than normal cleaning activities. The evidence Bobby had gathered represented the most comprehensive insider trading investigation in recent federal law enforcement history. But his personal safety depended on federal agencies acting quickly enough to arrest criminal network participants before they could identify and eliminate the source of evidence that threatened their operations. 3 weeks later, while Pinnacle investment management executives were conducting what they believed was a routine strategy meeting to coordinate their next phase of insider trading operations, federal agents executed synchronized raids across 8 cities that dismantled the most sophisticated corporate insider trading network ever prosecuted under federal securities laws. Bobby's evidence had provided the detailed documentation that federal prosecutors needed to obtain warrants for arrests that included corrupt executives from major corporations, regulatory officials who had been selling confidential government information, and financial professionals who had been coordinating systematic securities fraud that had defrauded honest investors of over $400 million. The federal operation resulted in the seizure of assets worth over $300 million, including offshore accounts used to launder insider trading profits, luxury properties purchased with illegal proceeds, and investment portfolios that contained evidence of systematic securities fraud spanning multiple years and dozens of major corporations. Bobby's intelligence had exposed a criminal organization that had successfully corrupted corporate governance, regulatory oversight, and financial markets while generating enormous illegal profits that had been stolen from pension funds, retirement accounts, and individual investors who trusted the financial system to operate honestly and fairly. But the real victory was measured in the protection of financial markets that millions of working families depended on for their retirement security, and the restoration of investor confidence in securities regulations that were designed to ensure fair and honest trading for all market participants rather than privileged access for criminal insiders. The criminal network's leader, Pinnacle CEO Marcus Blackwood, was convicted on racketeering charges and sentenced to 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, while over 40 co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 10 to 25 years for their roles in systematic securities fraud that had undermined the integrity of American financial markets. 6 months later, Bobby stood in a federal courthouse in Chicago, providing testimony that would result in convictions for over 60 individuals who had participated in insider trading activities that had stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from honest investors while corrupting the corporate and regulatory systems that were supposed to protect public trust in financial markets. Bobby's testimony was crucial for prosecutions that resulted in the largest financial recovery in securities fraud history, with over $600 million being returned to defrauded investors, pension funds, and retirement accounts that had been systematically robbed by corporate criminals who had exploited their positions for personal gain. After the trials concluded, Bobby received recognition from the Securities and Exchange Commission for civilian assistance that had resulted in the most significant insider trading prosecutions in federal enforcement history, protecting the integrity of financial markets from systematic criminal exploitation that had threatened public trust in corporate governance. But Bobby also received something more valuable: the knowledge that his retirement from federal law enforcement could continue while serving as a resource for protecting honest investors when criminal networks attempted to exploit corporate systems for illegal, financial gain that harmed working families and retirees. Bobby returned to his night janitorial work with a new understanding that his position could serve dual purposes: maintaining corporate facilities for legitimate business activities while remaining vigilant against criminal operations that threatened the financial security of millions of Americans who depended on honest markets for their economic well-being. 2 months later, Bobby began working as a consultant with the FBI Corporate Security Division, training other building maintenance staff, security personnel, and service workers to recognize signs of corporate criminal activity while coordinating with federal agencies when business environments showed indicators of securities fraud or insider trading. Bobby's experience demonstrated that retirement from federal law enforcement didn't mean retirement from protecting the financial systems that supported American families, and that civilian occupations could provide unique opportunities to identify corporate crimes that traditional investigation methods might miss due to the closed nature of executive business environments. The insider trading network that had exploited American financial markets was completely dismantled, but Bobby knew that other criminal organizations were constantly developing new methods to commit securities fraud while avoiding detection by regulatory agencies that struggled to monitor the complex and rapidly evolving nature of modern financial crimes. Bobby's new consulting work would help protect both honest investors and the corporate systems that supported legitimate business activities, while ensuring that criminal networks couldn't exploit their positions within corporate environments to steal from pension funds, retirement accounts, and individual investors who trusted the financial system to operate fairly. 15 years after leaving federal corporate crime enforcement, Bobby had discovered that some service to financial integrity never really ends. It just finds new ways to protect honest investors from criminal organizations that see corporate systems as opportunities to commit sophisticated fraud rather than infrastructure for legitimate business activities that support American economic prosperity. The night janitorial work that had provided Bobby with peaceful retirement became the setting for his most important contribution to corporate crime enforcement, proving that community-based vigilance by trained professionals could be more effective than traditional investigation methods when criminals attempted to exploit corporate environments for systematic financial fraud. So now I ask you, have you ever noticed suspicious corporate activities during unusual hours? Have you met someone whose background prepared them to recognize white-collar crime that others might miss? Share their story in the comments, because quiet guardians like Bobby deserve to be remembered. And if this story moved you, subscribe to Silent Heroes. We're here to honor the people who understand that protecting financial integrity requires constant vigilance, and that real heroism happens when someone chooses to act when our economic systems are threatened by corporate criminal networks. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the person cleaning offices at night has spent years learning to recognize when corporate activities cross the line into criminal behavior. And sometimes that expertise protects the financial security that millions of American families depend on for their future prosperity.